Hey everybody, it's Cam from the Nerd Book Review with part 2 of my top 10 classic fantasy series. Once again, that's books that started before the year 2000, and this video will be number 5 through number 1. You can watch the previous video to see number 10 through 6, as well as a few that missed the cut and why they missed the cut. Let's go ahead and get right to it then, and the series number 5 is the Farseer Trilogy by Robin Hobb. Now, this is a series, I've only read the Farseer Trilogy, but I loved all 3 of the books. 2 of the 3 I gave a 10 out of 10 to, and this is another one that's finished. There are a whole bunch of trilogies, quadrilogy or 2 as well, and they follow 2 different like storylines and quite a bit of time. But this Farseer Trilogy, which is what I'm going to actually, specifically include here, follows a character named Fitz. He is a bastard of the Farseer line. He will be dropped off at the beginning of the story on his the doorstep of his father's retainer, and he'll eventually go to court and be an assassin for the Farseer family. This is a series. This first trilogy is a little bit different too, where Fitz is recounting this story as he's an old man, and so we know that he lives through all of this. Because of that, I feel like Robin Hobb definitely treats Fitz a little bit worse than your standard protagonist, because there has to be, that suspense of bad things happening to him, and a lot of bad things happen to Fitz. Basically, the area of the Six Duchies is being attacked by, think of like Vikings, and they are taking their people and basically taking all morality out of them. And that's actually their threat when they sack a city, that if they're not paid ransom, they're going to not kill the villagers that they get. So that's kind of one of the issues. And then on the other side is a split within the Farseer family itself. One of the heir versus the spare kind of issue. And we're just going to deal with a trilogy that I really enjoyed. Fitz is going to start off as just a small boy, and by the end of the trilogy, he'll be in his 30s. So it's, spans quite a period of time. Includes a fair number of, mythical creatures. We've got dragons, things like that. But for the most part, it's an epic fantasy about both existential threat as well as betrayal from within. It was a series, like I said, I didn't start reading until this year, and I've just absolutely loved it. And I kind of feel like it would have been a real shame if I had not had Robin Hobb on this list, at least at number 5. Number 4 is Memory, Sorrow, and Thorn by Tad Williams. This one, of course, starts off with the Dragonbow Chair and finishes up with the famously long Two Green Angel Tower. This is a series that inspired George R.R. Martin as well. This is a series that primarily follows a character named Simon, as he is in the land of Osten-Ard. There's been a king who established a dynasty and has ruled for a very long period of time. There's been a lot of prosperity. He dies at the beginning, and there's going to be a power struggle between his sons. And then Simon is just a lowly scullion boy when we start off with. Of course, he's going to be more than just that as the series goes on. This one, of course, started off in the 80s, so if you're a fantasy fan, you've probably read some of it, but I'm still trying to keep this review spoiler-free, as spoiler-free as I can. And so Simon is going to end up going on a long journey and help save the kingdom of Osten-Ard. This is one that the first 200 pages are really slow as it sets things up, and I almost quit reading at that time. If it hadn't been, for authors like George R.R. Martin, including this as like an inspiration for them, and me knowing that this was a classic series, I might have stopped reading at that point. And then from there on out, it's several thousand pages of just tons of action, epic, truly classic epic fantasy. And it's a series that by the time I was done, I just loved it so much. And, it's a series that I've now reread once, and it's really amazing if you just have to get past that first 200 pages that sets things up, right? Also, Tad Williams as an author, I've watched a bunch of interviews of Tad Williams, and he just seems like a really awesome guy as well. Okay, number 3 is one that could be a little controversial here. It is A Song of Ice and Fire. Now, you might say, well, the series isn't even completed. Why would you have it at number 3 still on your, favorite fantasy series of all time? And I'm gonna say that even though the last season of Game of Thrones on HBO was really really bad, I'm still like counting that as like the finishing of the series, and that I don't actually ever think that Martin's going to write the last couple books. If he does, then great. If not, I'm considering it finished. And A Game of Thrones and A Feast for Crows are just two of the best fantasy books that I've ever read. I absolutely just loved them. They're another one of those series that when the first 4 or 5 came out, I reread every book previously in the series since there was that big break. Same thing I did with what's going to be my number 1 series. And it was just one of those things where I know that it's a flawed series, that that it didn't get finished, or it's probably not going to get finished, but I just don't care. I loved those books that are out so much, especially the first few, and they're among my favorite, individual fantasy books ever. And so because of that, this is just always going to be one. In every one of my videos, you can see the World of Ice and Fire in the background. I have somewhere around here, I have more of the lore books. I just love it. I love the lore. I love the whole series that is currently out. I know that not all the books are as good as some of the others, and some of the way that had to be split up is a little bit different. But just one of my favorite series, even if it's never going to be finished, and that is what it is. Number 2 for me is going to be Malazan Book of the Fallen by Steven Erikson, as well as the companion books with Ian Esselmont. Now, this is another one of those this is another one that's kind of like the R.A. Salvatore books, where this one started off as like a board game, not in the Dungeons & Dragons world. It was its own thing. I don't know if actually the board game ever ended up getting done or not, but Steven Erikson, this is a series that's definitely controversial for several reasons. There's a lot of sexual assault in it, so that's a thing. Also, Malazan fans tend to be a little bit overboard and ridiculous on sites like Reddit. People on our fantasy will request a series, and someone's going to suggest Malazan, whether it fits or not. It was only just a few months ago, someone posted, I want an epic fantasy, multiple worlds, multiple, fantasy races, lots of magic, but no sexual assault at all. And someone actually, the first comment, they tried to argue that Malazan still fits what they want, even though there's a ton of sexual assault, right? So that's what Malazan fans do. Now, I am a Malazan fan, but I'm a reasonable Malazan fan, I suppose. And so I'm certainly not going to recommend this book for someone that doesn't want, dark, gritty fantasy. This one, some people would call it grimdark, but even Steven Erikson himself doesn't like to call it grimdark because he, feels that there's like a real thread of hope throughout all of this, even if some of these books are pretty darn dark. It follows a whole bunch of plot points, basically all revolving around that the world that the Malazan Empire is on is in danger of being destroyed because in the past a god was called to try to take out a different emperor, and as he is trying to get his strength back, that shattered god, he is causing a bunch of issues. Gods in the past had chained him, the shattered god, and so he's stuck, and so his poison as he's dying, as he's trying to escape, is really causing issues with the Warrens, which are basically the body, the veins of another god who is slumbering. Just truly epic on a crazy scale. The Dead House Gates and the Bone Hunters are two of my top, maybe 5 favorite fantasy books of all time. I do think that by about book 8, it starts to get a little bit philosophical, and Erikson was a big Shakespeare fan, and I feel like he's starting to bleed in by about book 8 already. But I still really enjoyed the entire series. I have now read the series twice and listened 3 times on audiobook. So obviously, I'm a big fan. I really love in those early books where you have a real personal, down view or squad view of characters in some cases, even though we're dealing with multiple world spanning events and different fantasy races. I think that Anomander Rake is probably the most epic fantasy character of any series ever. He's several 100,000 years old. He is a shapeshifter. He can turn into a magical dragon. He carries a sword called Dragnapur that, if it even touches you, steals your soul into a pocket dimension and forces you to carry a portal that trying to take it away from the forces of chaos. I mean, it's just crazy epic on just such a grand scale, while also following small squads and characters that I love from the very beginning to the end. It has a couple of sequel series that I'm not nearly as big a fan of so far. The Farseer Trilogy. So just a crazy series, certainly not one for everybody, but if you want the most epic fantasy series of all time, then that's going to be it for you. All right, the number one fantasy series of all time for me is The Wheel of Time by Robert Jordan / Brandon Sanderson. This is one I started reading when I was in high school. I have already mentioned this previously. I was 14. I was sitting in an English class being disruptive because this class was super easy and a joke. And we didn't have any AP classes back in my school at that time. So I would get done and I would talk too much in class, and my English teacher handed me the first book of The Wheel of Time, The Eye of the World, and said, read this and quit talking in class. I think I read the first 3, maybe the first 4 in her class that year, and I was hooked ever since. For those of you who are, worried about whether your series is going to get done or not, this was the ultimate one. Robert Jordan died before he finished the series off. The last 3 had to be finished by Brandon Sanderson. So this is one, too, that often gets talked about, where, say, books 8 through 11, there's a big slog, some of them even maybe before that. But I think that now having listened on audiobook 3 times and read the whole series twice since it's been finished, that I didn't feel like that slog was nearly as big of a deal when it's done already. When you were in the moment and you had waited 3 years for a book to come out or 4 years for a book to come out, and then the plot doesn't move forward very much, then that slog felt real in a way that it didn't. Now, of course, The Wheel of Time, for those of you who are somehow completely ignorant of what it is your classic farm boy chosen one. It has my absolute favorite character in all of fantasy, right up there with another one named Ruka from the Ash and Sand series. But Matt from The Wheel of Time, he of course is one of the chosen heroes. We're gonna take a stop here, and this is where I'm gonna bust out with the old Wheel of Time tattoo that I have. Yep, this is my Matt-inspired one. He, of course, is the Lord of the Ravens is one of his titles, as well as he's the leader of the Band of the Red Hand. That's where that Red Hand comes from. Just absolutely loved this series as a kid, as a teenager, I guess, and then I've read it multiple times as an adult as well. There's one other thing too. I bonded with 2 of my best friends from college who were also big fans. This one's got all of those. It's funny because I just did my least and favorite fantasy trope series, and a lot of my least favorite fantasy tropes are actually in The Wheel of Time, which is funny. I depend on how the chosen one farm boy is done. It's also got the dark one, right? He's basically pure evil, if you will. Just wants to end time. Then you have Rand, our chosen one. You have just such an epic, cool magic system with the Aes Sedai, the way the male and the female parts of the one power. This is a series that is just your classic fantasy series, a long journey, a whole bunch of point of view chapters, and our characters are going to grow up over a span of time. I loved every bit of it. now that I'm done. Those slog books, felt like a slog as a kid. And I have to admit that I'm not sure that I would love this series nearly as much if I started it as an adult. But, this was my series from the time I was a teenager, 14 years old, all the way through until it finally got done. And so, it's just, in my opinion, right behind Malazan of the most epic series ever, and huge fan. I would love to hear what your favorite fantasy series are. You can tell me why I am wrong on some of my favorite fantasy series, and just feel free to comment and let me know what you think. Thanks. Bye.